biggest night ever, and I couldn't be more disappointed. You know me, I'm usually mad at everything, but I'm not even mad. I'm just really disappointed.
Since the sport's inception, folks have shelled out plenty of hard-earned cash to see what happens inside the UFC octagon. While the action taking place in the cage is often exciting, the overwhelming majority of the time, it's how the fight ends that is forever etched into the collective consciousness of the MMA fanbase. As we are about to see, there are more than a few highly anticipated bouts that have become infamous for their less than stellar conclusions. From title fights to grudge matches, the contests we're about to revisit all have one thing in common: extremely disappointing endings. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Now, without further ado, and ranked in no particular order, let's take a look at 10 extremely disappointing endings to a fight. Number 10. Jeremy Stephens vs Yair Rodriguez 1. Jeremy Stephens is a long-time featherweight contender who has earned a reputation as one of the most exciting fighters in MMA. At UFC Fight Night 159, Lil Heathen was scheduled to take on another dynamic striker in the form of Yair Rodriguez, a man who seemed incapable of being involved in a boring fight. The thought of seeing these two explosive stars go at it had MMA fans ripe with anticipation. Unfortunately, when the two men met in the cage for the first time back in September of 2019, the result could not have been more disappointing. Just 15 seconds into the first round, Stephens suffered an accidental eye poke and was unable to continue. Thus, the fight was ruled as a no contest. The two men would face off again a month later at UFC on ESPN 6 and have the dream fight that everyone was expecting. Of course, that probably only made fans who purchased tickets to see their anticlimactic first encounter feel that much worse. Number 9. Donald Cerrone vs Tony Ferguson. Donald Cowboy Cerrone is a tough-as-nails UFC veteran, whose willingness to take on all comers has made him a favourite among fans. His UFC 238 opponent, Tony Ferguson, has been one of the lightweight division's best, and was heading into the contest riding an 11-fight win streak. When they finally met inside the octagon, it was an action-packed affair that had all fans on the edge of their seats. As the second round came to a close, Cowboy's nose had taken some damage. Unfortunately, Cerrone made the mistake of blowing his battered nose in between rounds, which caused his eye to swell up and shut. Instead of seeing what would almost certainly have been an epic third and final round, the ringside doctor was forced to stop the fight, resulting in a TKO victory for Ferguson. Number 8. Dustin Poirier vs Eddie Alvarez 1. UFC 211 featured a lightweight bout between two of the best the division had to offer, in Dustin the Diamond Poirier and Eddie the Underground King Alvarez. The first round of the contest was mostly forgettable, with Poirier controlling the pace and landing the cleaner punches. However, the second round was far more eventful. Poirier soon connected with a series of big shots, and even nearly finished Alvarez. Moments later, Alvarez turned the tables, nearly polishing off the Diamond with a barrage of his own. Just as things were really starting to heat up, the Underground King accidentally landed an illegal knee on his grounded rival, and the bout was ultimately ruled a no contest. It was an unsatisfying ending to an otherwise fantastic round. Luckily, the two were able to run it back just 1 year later, with Poirier winning the rematch with a second round knockout. Number 7. GEGARD MOUSASI vs Chris Weidman. At UFC 210, the All-American Chris Weidman went one-on-one with GEGARD MOUSASI in a fight that had middleweight title implications. For fans, it was an intriguing matchup that pitted Weidman's dominant wrestling against MOUSASI's world-class striking. In the latter portion of the second round, GEGARD managed to secure the former UFC champ's head and landed what looked like an illegal knee. The referee stopped the fight to give the Division 1 wrestler a chance to recover. However, during the intermission, the official discovered that the knees were in fact legal. Instead of letting the fight continue, the ref decided to award MOUSASI an anticlimactic TKO victory. This was a controversial call, as Weidman was still very much in the match when the action was initially stopped. Number 6. Jon Jones vs Matt Hamill. Though he's often promoted as an undefeated fighter, UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones does technically have an L on his record. The reigning title holder's lone defeat, or more specifically his only loss, came against Matt Hamill back in 2009, when the two faced off at the Ultimate Fighter heavyweight finale. In a contest he was winning handedly, Bones had his opponent mounted and threw several illegal 12-6 elbows. Rather than receive a simple warning, the violation ultimately resulted in disqualification. While Hamill was awarded the victory, elbows aside, the contest left little doubt that Jones was the superior fighter, which made the result even more disappointing. Number 5. Charles Oliveira vs Max Holloway. UFC Fight Night 74 was headlined by what had all the making of a classic grappler vs striker showdown, with Max Bless Holloway scheduled to collide with jiu-jitsu ace Charles Oliveira. Unfortunately, due to one of the most bizarre endings in recent memory, the fight failed to meet expectations. After what appeared to be a relatively uneventful failed takedown attempt, Oliveira was visibly injured and favouring his neck. While it was unclear what happened, the Brazilian was no longer able to continue, and referee Herb Dean had no choice but to stop the bout early in the first round, drawing things to a close before it even really got started. It was later discovered that the fluke injury turned out to be a micro tear of Oliveira's esophagus. Number 4. Khabib Nurmagomedov vs Conor McGregor. At UFC 229, Conor McGregor faced reigning lightweight title holder Khabib Nurmagomedov in what would turn out to be the most watched fight in MMA history. As most fans know by now, Nurmagomedov was able to finish his hated rival with a neck crank in the 4th round. That being said, it was what happened after the contest was decided that made the ending of UFC 229 so disappointing. Immediately following the fight, the lightweight champ decided to scale the cage and attack McGregor's training partner Dylan Dennis. While that was happening, 2 of Khabib's associates began brawling with the Irishman himself. This melee resulted in one of the most chaotic situations the world of professional sports has ever seen. While the incident made plenty of headlines, it wasn't the best look for a sport that has struggled long and hard to gain mainstream acceptance. Number 3. Nate Diaz vs Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Gamebred Masvidal and Nate Diaz have earned a reputation as being 2 of the baddest men to ever step foot inside the UFC cage. As such, it was only fitting that these men would fight for the inaugural BMF Championship. Both athletes are known for being relentless precision strikers who can take shots as well as dish them out. So, when these megastars finally clashed at UFC 244 last November, there were plenty of fireworks as expected. That evening, Masvidal's hand speed was the story of the fight, and the mounting damage to Diaz's face soon became visibly apparent. After the 3rd round, the Stockton native had a nasty gash over his right eye, which prompted the cage-side doctor to stop the contest. In truth, while they're often justified, a doctor's stoppage is never a fan-friendly way to conclude a fight. However, it's especially disappointing when athletes are competing for the title of the baddest mofo in the game. Number 2. Robbie Lawler vs Ben Askren. Ben Funky Askren was a former Bellator champ who was long hailed as one of the best mixed martial artists to never compete under the UFC banner. Of course, that all changed after a blockbuster trade that sent Askren to the UFC in exchange for longtime flyweight king Demetrius Johnson. Askren was immediately thrown to the wolves, and in his promotional debut, he was set to face former welterweight title holder Ruthless Robbie Lawler back at UFC 235. Lawler lived up to his nickname in the early going by dumping Askren on his head and unloading with a barrage of big shots. Unbelievably, Askren survived the initial storm, managing to get his opponent against the cage and eventually secure what looked like an old-fashioned schoolyard headlock. While in the hold, Lawler's hands dropped to the mat, causing referee Herb Dean to mistakenly believe he was unconscious, and thus stop the fight. The moment Askren let go, a visibly frustrated Lawler immediately sprang to his feet and protested the controversial decision. It was an unsatisfying conclusion to a hotly anticipated debut. Number 1. Anderson Silva vs Chris Weidman 2. In their first encounter at UFC 162, Chris Weidman shocked the world by knocking out longtime middleweight title holder Anderson the Spider Silva. Given the Spider's lengthy title reign, the UFC thought the Brazilian striker deserved an immediate rematch, which took place in December of 2013 at UFC 168. The ending to their second fight would be every bit as memorable as the first, albeit for a different reason. In one of the most gruesome incidents to ever occur inside the octagon, during what appeared to be a routine check kick, Silva's leg literally snapped on live television. It was later revealed that the former champ had broken both his fibula and tibia, in what could only be described as a graphic ending to a highly anticipated rematch. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, then please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching guys, and we'll see you on the next video.